I mean, it's a distressing video, absolutely, and one that has shocked South Africans, not just in the community that this child lives in Westbury, but certainly in other parts of the country. So we're keen to hear your thoughts. What are drugs doing in your own community, and how are you seeing them impacting not just the most vulnerable, young people, but we're talking all the way down to children? Send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. Let's expand the conversation. We are now joined by Sanka's Adri Vermeulen. Thank you so much for joining us. We're joined by a child rights activist, Dr. Joan van Niekerk, and a Teddy Bear Clinic's Dr. Shahida Omar. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to start with just, you know, your first sight of this video, if you caught sight of it, or at the very least when you heard about it. Dr. van Niekerk, initial thoughts, because I remember seeing it and it was just absolute shock.
I was just appalled, to be honest with you. And look, I know when people are under the influence of drugs, including alcohol, they do the most irresponsible things. But this is also cruel in terms of what they're exposing the child to, the impact of the drug on the child, both in the short term and the long term. It's hard to believe that someone would do this to a 3-year-old child.
Yeah, and yet we saw it happening. Dr. Omar, your initial thoughts, and I'm keen to hear from you if you run across similar cases in your work with the Teddy Bear Clinic.
Thank you. So I think it was just horror. My body was trembling. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A young child, defenseless, a toddler, who has been subjected to this kind of confusion. I mean, the child cannot even process what he was subjected to. And the valorization with the trio actually sharing that, capturing it on video and sharing that, the sensationalization, the messaging conveyed to the community, normalizing such toxic, pathological behavior. And you asked if the Teddy Bear Foundation has seen cases like this. We've seen cases like this in cases of human trafficking, where mothers have had children, 3-year-olds. We can speak about in the East End, a 3-year-old child who was subjected to similar experiences. And of course, it's just horrific. And as Dr. Joan van Niekerk said, the long-term implications, effects on the child, because if you look at the neurological pathways as well, how it would impact the brain, the damaging and predisposing the brain and the behavior to precursors of self-destructive, self-defeating behavioral patterns in the long term, which one cannot fathom or understand unless one contextualizes it. But also listening to what Kurt van Heerden said about the short-term, interventions and the long-term, long-standing problem. It's a whole of society approach and effort, a collective effort and multidisciplinary effort that would be required before any change can be seen.
Yeah, I think about how quite often when we talk about the development of children, we spend a lot of time thinking about the first 1,000 days of a child's life, so incredibly important to the development of a child's brain. Now, Adri, perhaps you can help us with just understanding what chemically is going on when a 3-year-old, their brain at such an early developmental age, is exposed to a drug as dangerous as Mandrax.
Absolutely, and I just want to concur with my colleagues are saying, just in terms of my reaction to the video first, your first question was a range of emotions from anger to disbelief to, is this AI generated? It was just unbelievable and unreal to have seen such a video. And I think I'm glad that it will be taken off the circuit and nobody else will be exposed to that.
Yeah.
But I think from what you are saying in terms of development, my first thought was this child even exposed to it while the mother was pregnant with him? And we even look at the impact on the fetus and how the brain develops at a very young age in the body of the mom, and how drugs affect that development as well, you know. So I was just thinking already, you know, of fetal alcohol syndrome and also the other disorders that comes with the use of specifically mandrax, because mandrax is very potent, and then it's never used alone. It's always used in conjunction with cannabis. So it's a mixture of mandrax and cannabis, which we call the white pipe. And that combination is potent for any adult. Now, what's less a child that's still developing, like you're saying, going through the different stages, the brain chemistry that is affected, it causes long-term severe impact on the normal development of this brain. So you're also not looking at severe behavioral problems later in life. You look at learning disabilities, you look at intellectual impairment, memory, impulse control. So a whole range of normal behavior will be affected by this young person being exposed to this from a young age. And we also don't know how regularly this happened or how frequently this has happened to the child, and probably being exposed to secondhand smoke from also mandrax for over a long period of time. That also has health effects for the child as well. So it's a whole range of effects. And then obviously later in life, these children are 5 times more likely to develop their own substance use disorder and other mental health disorders that comes with that. So it's really a great concern. What we've seen here is a reality that a lot of children are exposed to in these toxic families, you know. So we don't believe that this is only a once-off case. You know, this is definitely something, like Dr. Shahida was saying, this is something they've seen, this is something we've seen in our field, and I'm sure Dr. Joan can also agree with that. We're seeing younger and younger children coming for treatment. We're looking at 4-year-olds coming through for treatment, and they are exposed through parents, you know, and the systems and the environments that they are growing up in, where drugs are normalized for these children.
I do want to give Dr. Van der Kerk an opportunity to respond to that. I just want to take a quick call because we are also opening up the lines for our viewers to share perspectives from their own communities. Are you seeing similar instances where drugs are reaching children? We've got a caller. Cyril is in Durban. Cyril, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling.
Not too bad. Hi to your viewers. I just want to say something.
Sure.
Look, this issue about violence, it is not just men that perpetrate violence. And we agree that men are the vast majority that do perpetrate violence. But we cannot ignore that women are also perpetrating violence towards their own children.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, I really do believe that instead of having just a minister of women and children, why not the woman? Why not the president? Why not the minister of humanity? Because everything starts with humanity. Whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, but you are a human being first.
Okay.
Now, if you cannot look at that first and say, oh, well, it's just the men that do all the perpetrating. But meanwhile, the last couple of months, it is women that are really hurting the children.
Yeah. You know.
So let's not try and divide this.
Sure.
Because as soon as you divide, then the one side feels less appreciated.
Yeah, Cyril, you've made an incredibly important point. Because when we start having a conversation about us and them and who's perpetrating the violence in this country, we're not getting to the root of it. And that is essentially helping the most vulnerable, in this case, the child. Cyril, thank you so much for calling. Joan, Dr. Van der Kerk, I see you wanting to step in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to respond to Cyril first and say, Cyril, yes, no gender is free from either receiving violence or perpetrating violence. And there's a lot of interesting research out there. Most children grow up without engaged fathers. Either they're not present or they're not present emotionally, not present physically or not engaged emotionally. And we know that there are many mothers who abuse their children, particularly physically and emotionally. However, gender is not important here. We need to look at the prevention of violence, full stop, across all genders, all sectors of society. And that also includes older children, because we are seeing older children perpetuating crimes against younger children. But I want to go back to something that Audrey said.
Sure.
One of our biggest concerns, in my experience, is that people joke about giving children things like alcohol. They think it's funny.
Yep.
It's not funny. You are preparing a child to normalize a drug, no matter the age of the child. The saddest thing is that children are exposed during pregnancy, particularly to mandrakes. In actual fact, go through the most hideous withdrawal after birth. And that withdrawal keeps that child irritable and unable to settle and having problems, as Audrey said, for quite a period of time. The other issue that I've come across, and this sadly I've seen in many contexts in communities on child pornography, when I'm asked to give expert evidence relating to child pornography, is we sometimes see children drugged in order to commit a crime against them. Because in that way, the child will not cry, the child will not protest, and this is particularly true of younger children. So one wonders what happened to this child after smoking meth. Were they preparing the child for some other act of violence against the child? Because I think just giving the meth on its own, meth pipe on its own, is an act of violence against a child. So it's a very complex situation, and our society really needs to do some hard thinking about prevention.
Sure, that's quite a picture that you've painted. What happened to the child after the drugs were given to them, and how many instances of these do we see in our own country? And Dr. Van Niekerk making an interesting point is that in some communities, in many of our communities, and perhaps you've seen this as well, jokes being made around giving alcohol to children, something that is seen as quite lighthearted and funny, but what are the long-term effects of that? We're going to continue with this discussion on the other side of it. What are the interventions that are necessary? And talk to us about your own community via WhatsApp 072-110-5584 or give us a call 010-594-6010. We are back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we continue getting reaction, of course, from our panel as well as our viewers to the story coming out of a community in Johannesburg and Westbury, where, of course, we saw the video making rounds on social media. 3 adults are handing drugs to a 3-year-old toddler. The 3 adults, of course, have now been arrested. But it certainly has begged the question, what is going on in our communities when that video can go viral? Because it's also recorded and uploaded on social media for people to see. If you look very carefully, the child even uses a matchstick. They've been seeing the lighting of this drug many times, perhaps, in their home. Very familiar to this activity. And we're taking your calls on 010-594-6010. Audrey, I see you nodding when I say there's a familiarity that we see in this video. This child has seen this before.
Yeah, this child knows exactly what to do. What 3-year-old knows how to strike a match, so this child has done it probably before and is used to this, so this is not the first time. And I will not be shocked if this has happened even at a younger age with this child, because you can see that they've been coached and they have done this many times. There's an ashtray next to the lady, and you can see there's other matchsticks there. So I don't think this was the first time this child was exposed to this. It was definitely there for a long time. He grew up with this, it is that's life for him. Like many kids, they don't know what is right or wrong. They don't know what's the difference between their family and another family, a normal family. Only when they're older and they start processing and able to think clearly can they see the difference. But at this stage, this is what that child's normal looks like.
Yeah. Well, at this point, Dr. Omar, the 3 adults in the video have been arrested. But the question begs, what happens to the child? Perhaps talk to us about what the system does in a situation like this, Dr. Omar.
Well, it's clearly evident that this child has been at risk and this child is in need of care. If we look at the rights of the child being violated, the right to protection, safety, nutrition, health, one can go on infinitely in terms of the constitutional rights under Section 28. So again, the Children's Act speaks to the best interest of the child, promoting the best interest of the child. And I think one has to commend the community for taking some action by reporting it, and JMPD stepping up and removing this child, where the child was removed by the FCS unit, the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences unit. Of course, we mustn't dismiss the fact that this child has been removed from the primary caregiver. A bond has been formed, an attachment. We don't know what kind of attachment, whether it's insecure, secure, but it is the primary caretaker and caregiver of this child. So it's highly likely that the child would display separation anxiety as well, because being taken out of the familiar environment from persons that the child has bonded with and now into another setting. But we have to factor in the most important thing, that this child has to be kept safe and prevent any further violation or placing the child at further risk. So the system certainly would be statutory interventions where the child would then, would have to go into a children's court. They would look at if there's next of kin within the immediate family structure that the child could be safe with, or else, of course, they would look at alternative care. And if we just look at the whole Children's Act, the ethos of the Children's Act looks at preservation of the family. Now, what Audrey said, I completely support that, because one can see this is not an isolated incident or a random incident. This seems to be something chronic occurring over a period of time, because no person in a sound mental health state or of rational mind would subject a 3-year-old to this kind of behavior. And if we look at reconstructive services within social development, where a 3-year-old, what can you do with a 3-year-old? It's about containment, preventing further risk, nurturing, play therapy with the child, enabling the child to express himself through his play, because whatever trauma or confusion that a child is sitting with, it sits on the forebrain, and often they reenact that in their play. So that is a way to work with children. But if we talk about reconstruction again, and Andre is probably an expert, and Dr. Joan van Niekerk, around the fact that if there's an opportunity for intervention, so rehabilitation, intervention, rehabilitation and reintegration, and if there's favorable prognosis and progress, certainly there would be an opportunity to bring mother and child into a reunification process. But again, that, one can only go with the process. One has to stay with the process, follow that through, and ensure that the child is kept safe and protected at all times. But at the same time, one needs to also look at how best to support the mother.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few callers coming in. Let's hear some of their voices as well. Graham is in Potchefstroom. Graham, good evening. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Sure, talk to us.
Well, what you guys are trying to do here, this is a long, drugs is a big thing in South Africa, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, it's so easy to stop it, but you must never let emotion overrule common sense. That's the first thing. Never let emotion overrule common sense. You need the death penalty. If you had a death penalty, this whole thing would stop in 6 months.
But who are you
Okay.
putting? But who are you? The death penalty. Who's that hurting?
The drug dealers,
Okay.
the guys that are selling these people drugs.
Okay.
There must be the death penalty for drug dealers.
All right. Unfortunately, at this point, though, it's unconstitutional. But Graham, thank you so much for calling in. Mohammed is in Johannesburg. Mohammed, good evening. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. I grew up in Ukraine. I think I understand the society. What I would urge is that civil society comes together, especially the faith-based communities, to bring back the issue of morality and values in life. We've gone too far with this new liberal attitudes and views, including your TV station that actually exposes us all the time. So I think what I want to urge is that the faith-based communities, other civil society organs in the area come together to address this particular matter, and this should be an issue that should be discussed at the national dialogue, the issue of new liberalism, the values of society, regeneration of society, and the regeneration of values back into our societies. Thank you.
Mohammed, thank you so much. Here's the thing. I don't think you're going to find a lot of people that are going to disagree with what you said, Mohammed, because even in this case, you've seen a community that stood up and said, well, this is wrong. We're going to figure out what's gone on. So communities also want to have the resources to try and get some of these things out of their own spaces. But Dr. van Niekerk, let's talk about some of the, I suppose, what programs are available to deal with a situation like what we've seen in this video. Dr. Omar talking about, well, reconstructive services, things like trauma counseling, play therapy. These are all things that unfortunately are not available in the most vulnerable of our communities, Dr. van Niekerk.
You are absolutely right. At the moment, I'm working with an organization that does a lot of work in the Dunoon area of Cape Town. And I don't know if there are any Cape Townians listening, but if you live in Cape Town, you know what a disordered and dysfunctional community this is. And there are no, resources that are really well qualified in terms of alcoholism and drug addiction. And we see very young children using drugs in this particular area, often starting off with the Langdacher pipes and so on. And it's so normalized. I agree. We really do need a groundswell of community care for what the morality is, what the primary morality is within our community. And we need to be working with community members to grow a sense of we are responsible for our children. We need to make sure they are safe. We are responsible for helping those who are drug addicted to see a different light in front of them. And I think this is where SANCA is very important. And I think Audrey should respond to this question. One thing I would like to say is, SANCA is amazing. Many years ago, I worked for SANCA. I don't know if Audrey remembers that. But rehabilitation is extremely difficult, extremely long-term, and you really need well-qualified people, and we just don't have enough people in this country or enough money to pay them if we did. Yeah. So government has to have a real rethink on where they are putting their resources, whether for some people it's in my pocket or whether it is certain things that are seen to have a greater value than the rearing of our children. Yeah. I think what is of concern, in the last budget speech for DSD, the national minister did not mention children once, not once. They are the foundation of our society. It's how we grow our children and build on their lives that will determine the future.
Yeah. That is an interesting point. When we come back, though, we're going to start looking at more solutions. And Audrey, of course, will hopefully give us a few resources on where to go to get help in our various communities so that we're able to get the drugs out as much as we possibly can. We'll wrap up after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Right, let's take a look at a few WhatsApps from my viewers who are responding to that video coming out of Westbury in Johannesburg that made the rounds on social media. Hopefully not going to make the rounds anymore, considering that it is an innocent child in there. But in there, of course, 3 adults seem to be giving drugs to a 3-year-old child, a toddler, to smoke. These are the views from our viewers. Tabo Mobai says, hi, Naledi. In most cases, neighbors and other community members are aware, but don't report to the authorities. Social disorder and any form of abuse needs to be dealt with harshly. Tabo, thank you so much for that. To Gilbert in Polokwane says, Naledi, drugs seem to be fashionable and a norm to the generation of today. Even if you go out now to the nearest park, you find them in groups enjoying drugs, and it's not easy to discourage them. That means the play areas are gone as well, Gilbert. That's what it means. Tepo in Flagstop says, a very sad reality of the current uprising of child abusers. Really breaks my heart to see how mothers who are supposed to protect these kids are hurting and killing them. We must start eradicating drug dealers and alcohol in our community, as it is the main catalyst of all these social ills happening in our community. Tepo, thank you so much for that. Let's take one last caller. Tepo is in Boksburg. Tebogo, apologies. Tebogo is in Boksburg. Tebogo, good evening.
Good evening. Oh my God, I'm flabbergasted. I'm disgusted.
Yeah.
I'm disgusted because as a mother to a girl child, I dread the day for I don't know, touch wood, but if my child goes missing or anything happens to her, I'm going to be suspect number 1. Because getting to the police station, mothers are killing their kids, if not for drugs or muti or anything, then it is mothers feeding now their kids drugs. What is happening in our country? Where is social services in times like this? I am beyond words.
Yeah. Deborah, I think you share the frustration of so many. Thank you so much for calling. Okay, there's a few calls coming in. Henley in White River. Henley, good evening. Henley in White River, good evening. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, talk to us. Thank you for calling. You're live.
Thank you. Yes, with regard to a comment that someone has delivered with regard to the death penalty.
Sure.
You know, I feel actually the same than the previous commenter because with regard to rapists and murderers and the drug lords, there's no consequences for them. And, you know, most of the time it's court cases that's been dragged out for years, and sometimes even rapists and murderers get away. So I feel really they should look into the death penalty, and the constitution must be changed because lots of countries that have changed to the death penalty do not have this problem that South Africa has.
Perhaps something to put on the table for the national dialogue. Henny, thank you so much for calling and really appreciate it. We do need to move towards wrapping this up. Audrey, give us some resources. And here's the reality. In a situation like this, we need to know where to go in each community, but you also need to be able to say, well, this is what we know is tailor-made for the mother, because they have to take care of a little one as well.
Yes, definitely. There's so many resources available, but I don't think people are always aware of it. So as SANCO, we've got 32 treatment centers across the country, but we also have over 100 service points. So if you go to our website, sanconational.info, you will be able to get all the different treatment centers that you can approach for assistance. But then also DSD on their website has got a list of registered treatment centers. And we want people to really make sure when you are sending somebody to treatment, it is registered, you know. So make sure on the DSD website that it is so. They also have illegal treatment centers also on the website that you can also double check where you are sending your loved one. And then also SADC has got they are manning the substance abuse helpline, 24-hour helpline. And I would also urge people to use them. We work closely with them as well on 0800 12 13 14. And that is a very important number to remember, because they would also refer you to the closest center to you. But we are there to assist. I think there is a lot to say around solutions. And I think, Joan, you touched on some of it, and Shada's also touched on some of it. But the main point for me that I want to come across is we need to start from inception to out of school youth with programs right across the board, and that we must start seeing prevention as a science. We must not see it as a luxury, and we must get government to invest in prevention. And there's many models in the world that shows us that if we start at a very young age, we are likely to succeed in 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a program called Planet Youth, and we can have an idea of how we can address that as a society.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we did have Dr. van der Kerk talking about the point around DSD and just how much attention has been given to young people. You've talked about the website. Dr. Omar, I'll let you have the last bite here. And that is a final thought that you want to leave, particularly mothers and community leaders with after this.
So I think what Audrey mentioned, you know, the websites are not accessible to everybody. We need to have robust engagement in the communities themselves. Community radio stations and faith-based platforms are ideal platforms to engage with communities, making them aware of accessibility and availability, but also to destigmatize the issue around mental health, where mental health facilities and resources are made accessible and available to all, to see it as a strength and not a weakness if people are struggling mentally with depression, anxiety, personality disorders, mood disorders, but also enhancing social services, Department of Social Development, bringing in decentralizing services within the communities, and particularly these hotspot communities where there's systemic issues here, and a systemic perspective on prevention is required.
Yeah.
Because we look at the lack of recreational facilities, opportunities, and I think these are things that have to be addressed, but also parenting programs are critical. Children are not born with parenting manuals, and parents do not realize the impact of their behaviors, the role model, the emulation on children. And this is how we need to empower, enable parents at your antenatal clinics, at your general clinics, across taxi ranks, wherever there's an opportunity, we need to empower and enable parents on how to be effective parents.
Ladies, I'm out of time, but thank you so much for a really important discussion, and I appreciate the time that you've given us. Hopefully a reminder to our community members about the responsibility that we all have to our children. Auntie Vermeulen of Sanka, Joan van der Kerk is, of course, Dr. Joan van der Kerk, a child rights activist, and Dr. Shahida Omar of the Teddy Bear Foundation. We're back in a moment. Stay with us.